For not the first time this election season, Donald Trump's remarks about those he despises match the weightless, gleeful, dehumanizing style perfected by Nazis and fascists during World War II.
When they let, I think the real number is 15, 16 million people into our country, when they do that, we got a lot of work to do. They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done.
CBS News chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett is with me now. Major, poisoning the blood of our country. You have followed Donald Trump a long time. Help me understand those comments and what they say to you.
What they say to me, John, is once he said it and all the stories noted accurately and with historical weight and resonance, the comparisons to what Adolf Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf, almost the exact same verbiage. One would think Donald Trump might pull back from that, having been scorched by that historically searing memory. He did not. He added this to remarks in New Hampshire over the weekend. And at one level, Trump advocates could say it's just a primal scream of frustration about immigration policy. It's not. You don't need to say you're frustrated with immigration policy and use this particularly loaded, historically awful, atrocious rhetoric. Point two, rather. If you add it to other things that former President Trump has said, he wants pseudo-concentration camps to hold those he intends to deport. He wants to use the American military. He wants to use almost all of federal law enforcement to become marauding sentries around the nation to organize deportation. And he wants loyalists within his administration who will do only what he asks them to do and nothing else. If you add all those things together, what do you get? Do you get someone who is faithful to the Constitution and existing federal law, or someone who wants to impose his own will on this country? That rhetoric suggests what I just said, imposing will, not living within constitutional bounds. And if you don't believe me on that, just recall what happened after the 2020 election, when rhetoric led to manifestly unconstitutional behavior.
And also the idea of judging people by the blood in their veins.
Which is a totality, not a singularity. It is a totality. And if you don't think history has taught us anything about people and leaders who speak in that way, it has. When you use all-encompassing language, guess what? You may not be there at first, but you may end up there second or third.
Right.
History has taught this lesson over and over again.
And as you say, it's not about immigration. There are a lot of people with that same blood who are Americans and who are nevertheless caught in the net of what he's saying. Why do you think he's pressing this button, given that all the polls show he's coasting basically to his party's nomination? Or do I have it exactly backwards? It's because he's coasting that he can talk like this.
I think it's because he is coasting. He doesn't feel any constraints within his party. He believes this is a movement entirely of his creation, and he can do with it what he chooses. And he wants those, if he is elected again, to remember that movement and his demand of loyalty. So if he becomes elected, and they do serve him, they serve him ferociously and with that kind of loyalty that he's only asking for himself, not for the American experiment and not for the constitutional order.
Let me ask you about one of his challengers. The super PAC for Ron DeSantis was once seen as a behemoth.
Sure.
I mean, but a top strategist, the top strategist for that super PAC resigned. What's behind that?
It's a story that you and I have seen, John, play out over the last 10 to 12 years. When we were covering campaigns together back in the 90s and early 2000s, there was one campaign. Not a super PAC with a whole other set of leaders and strategists and pollsters, and then a campaign. There was a campaign. Well, now there's a campaign and there's a super PAC. Well, in Ron DeSantis' case, the super PAC was much larger than the campaign, much more fortified with money and strategists and pollsters and people who had ideas. And they warred constantly with the campaign. Oh, and in between that was an underperforming candidate. And you know and I know what happens when there's an underperforming candidate. Everyone gets blamed. But in this case, the big money side got blamed more harshly for essentially Ron DeSantis's underlying inability to be persuasive and build a momentum which he started with. It's all declined. That's not the super PAC's fault. That's Ron DeSantis' fault. But when they're not aligned and when they're warring with each other over this bad performance, somebody's got to take the fall.
And as we head towards Iowa, you can dispense with this quickly, but it looks like Donald Trump's only getting stronger.
He's only getting stronger for two reasons. One, and this is underreported, his campaign this year is very, very well organized and structurally very sound. They do a lot of blocking and tackling in Iowa. They do it in New Hampshire, doing it in South Carolina. And all the ones who were going to contest Iowa, Tim Scott, Mike Pence, have all dropped out. And Ron DeSantis is not gaining momentum. Right. It's wide open.
Yeah, it's a great organizational point because in 2016, they had no kind of organization.
They didn't. They just had him.
Cruz. Right, right. That's a great point. Major Garrett, it's always great to see you and great to see you in person.
Thanks.